Trina, and this is my May reading wrap-up. This month I read a total of 7 books, but technically it was just 6 individual books because one of those was a book I read and then immediately reread in full. But there are 6 books I will be reviewing in this video, and you saw what they were in that intro there. I put timestamps down in the description so you can easily jump around to whatever you want to hear about. And there's also GOODREADS links to every book I mentioned down below. Let's go ahead and check in with my TBR. This month I had planned to read 8 books, and I actually read 5 of those 8. And it's perfectly okay because I was enjoying what I read, but those other 3 books I do hope to get to as soon as I can. So on to my reviews. Everything I read this month was rated either 4 or 5 stars. So if a whole bunch of really positive reviews just aren't your thing, then I've got some negative reviews that have gone up recently if you prefer that. Since all of the books I read this month I really liked and they were all pretty equally rated, this time I'm not going to be going through the rank by starting with my lowest rated book and ending on my highest rated book. I'm just going to go through what I read this month in the order that I read them. First up, I reread The Fifth Wave and The Infinite Sea by Yancey. This is a YA post-apocalyptic alien invasion story. There have previously been 4 waves of alien attacks, and we're following these different survivors as they are learning more about the aliens and preparing for what the 5th attack or the 5th wave might be. I read this book first when it came out and I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars, and I gave it 5 stars again upon this reread. The reason for that is because I typically just really love survival stories, and I also personally really love stories that deal with aliens learning what humanity really is or experiencing what human emotions are for the first time, because this really puts me in touch with what it means to be human and what it means to have the emotions that we have every single day of our lives. So stories like this make me really grateful. The first time I read it, there's a character that's nicknamed Zombie. I really did not like his point of view the first time, but upon the reread I actually grew to enjoy that perspective, and I actually came to see that there's a lot of harmony of plot in this book. There's a group on the outside trying to get in and a group on the inside trying to get out, and then we watch these 2 storylines collide, and I just really thought that this was well woven together. So for me it felt very fulfilling. The only thing I liked less the second time was I did kind of feel like the romance elements were a little bit melodramatic. Still, there were some things about that situation that I really enjoyed that made the book for me too, so I can't say I hated that. As for The Infinite Sea, originally I had given this book 3 stars right after reading it because I felt it was a bit of a letdown, and then I upped it to 4 stars a few months after that. Upon the reread, I would stick with that 4-star rating. I think really what let me down the first time was just my false expectations. It does not live up to the first book, but this book does what a second book should do, and it continues that story while building up for the final book. So this book does act as a bridge. The second time I read it, it just allowed me to kind of get out of my head of what I had expected back when this one came out and just enjoy it for what it was. I absolutely would recommend this series to anyone that likes survival stories or perhaps like post-apocalyptic invasion type stories. It gives you a bit to think about, and sometimes things aren't always what they seem, so to me it just always keeps me on my toes, and I'm really eager to see how the 3rd book ends up. Next up, I read The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater, which is the 4th and final book in the Raven Cycle series. This is a YA urban fantasy paranormal adventure series that follows a house of psychics, a group of private school boys, and an ordinary girl seeking out the tomb of a lost king because legend says whoever can find his tomb and wake him will be granted a favor. So all of the characters we follow each have their own reasons for wanting his favor. This is one of my all-time favorite series. What I really love about this series is the characters. They're very dynamic. I love the friend group. The writing is very flowery. It's very metaphoric, but it's beautiful. And I do have a full series review up that's non-spoiler over the whole series if you want to know more of my thoughts, and I also have a spoiler full book talk on The Raven King. Really, I loved everything about it, but I took half a star off because I feel like some things in the end weren't stated as concretely as I needed them to be. I read the print copy of this and immediately I turned around and listened to the entire audiobook of it because I wanted to experience again. I have talked about my love of the audiobooks many times before. I could not miss out on the final audiobook. And in that second time listening to it, I picked up on a few more things that I had missed the first time, but I still didn't pick up on everything. It took me having a conversation with one of my friends about this book to realize I had missed one of the biggest things about it. And I went back and reread a bunch of scenes, and then I reread a bunch of scenes from the first book in the series, and my mind was just like reeling. Like, it's given me the most feels of any book I've read so far this year. But it took me 3 times through this book to pick up on that. I think that given some things and the way some things are worded, you could very easily miss it. If you want to know more of what I'm talking about, I covered all of that in my spoiler full book talk on this one. But I would highly recommend this series and its audiobooks. Next up, I read Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. This is a YA fantasy romance story. This is Rainbow Rowell's take on a Chosen One story, kind of like Harry Potter, but it's like a parody of that. And in this book, we follow a boy that goes to a magical boarding school, and he knows he is the Chosen One. He has been prophesied to go up against this villain or this threat to their magic system, and if that's not enough weight on his shoulders, he is also dealing with his arch nemesis at school, his roommate that just seems to have it out for him at every turn. So this is actually an LGBTQIA+ romance, and we know that from the first moment that we meet the character that has a crush on the main character. And I really love the way that this was handled, because it still presents that opportunity for the characters to come out and discovering this new relationship without it coming as a plot twist or a shock to the reader. I mention that because I recently have mentioned in a series where I hated as character orientation was used as a plot twist. This is a fantasy standalone, but this is based on the fan fiction that was in Rainbow's other book, Fangirl, although this is not the actual fan fiction that Kath wrote in that book. This is just a completely new thing. You do not need to have read Fangirl to read this one. There are a lot of similarities to the world of Harry Potter in terms of that this is a magical boarding school, but I felt like Rainbow set that apart pretty quickly. The magic system is pretty unique, and I really enjoyed getting to know what it was like. And I also just adored the characters and the friendships and the romance. I really, really love the character of Baz. He is a little cinnamon roll, and I just want to give him a hug. This really got me out of a reading slump because I felt like all I wanted to do was listen to audiobooks, and I could not have the attention for reading a print book, and then I picked this one up and just wanted to devour it. Highly recommend it if you love anything else by Rainbow Rowell, because this has her signature romantic charm to it. Even though it's a fantasy, I thought it was an excellent first foray into fantasy by her. And lastly this month, I reread A Court of Thorns and Roses and read A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. These are books 1 and 2 in the Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy. These are new adult or adult. Very, very adult themes. There's a lot of language and violence and sexual content. This is an epic fantasy in a world where Fae exists, and Fae and humans used to live together, and then there was this brutal war, and now they're separated and they have all these prejudices against each other, and a human girl ends up taking the life of a Fae, and her punishment for that is basically to give her life up. She could either die or she could come and live with one of the Fae lords, and she ends up coming and living with him basically as his prisoner. And this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I read this one when it first came out, and my thoughts on it then were that the first half was very slow, very predictable, because it did have all those very familiar elements to the retelling, but then the second half of it got really exciting for me, and I gave it a 4-star when I read it the first time. And the reason I wanted to reread this one is because the second book was coming out, and in the past year I have heard so many great reviews, so many terrible reviews. I have heard people calling each other names for having liked or having disliked this series, and I just feel like my thoughts on it were very muddied, and I wanted to kind of reclaim what I thought of it instead of what other people were telling me about it. I reread it, and I have to say honestly that I see the problems. I see that these characters are very manipulative and that a lot of situations are very unhealthy, but they don't bother me the way that I think some people want them to bother me, because this is a high fantasy world. This is not our world at all. They don't live by our rules and our morality, and these Fae are extremely animalistic. I'm not saying that's an excuse for anybody to act that way in the real world or in real life, but I definitely think that you can see a book's flaws and still overall enjoy the book. I also think that you can look at a character and say, I like this character, but that in no way, shape, or form is saying, I want to be in a relationship with a person that's like this character. I like the characters for the context that they are in, for the world and the story that is being developed here. So basically what I'm saying is that it's possible to read a book critically and still enjoy it for what it is, and that really is the camp that I fall in. So then I picked up A Court of Mist and Fury with all of these questions and wondering if I was gonna like it and where was it gonna go, and there's this potential for growth, and I felt like that potential for growth was met and exceeded in this book. There is one character in this book that I feel like things came on a bit quickly and I would have liked to have known more about that, but the other main characters that we have were so much more developed than they were in the first book. I went straight from the first book into this one and I could tell from page 1 that just the narration and Feyre's internal voice was so much stronger this time around. I enjoyed that Feyre actually thought about the situations that she was in. She showed a lot of internal processing and I really appreciated that. I love the different politics of the Fey realms. Like there's all these different realms in that Fey world and Sarah J Maas has created all these various species of Fey, and so I felt like it was a very diverse world. I have a really great appreciation for this book because it does deal with things like toxic relationships and even depression. There were some things that struck a really deep personal chord with me that I haven't read about in a book, and it triggered me because it's situations that I don't want to have to re-experience, but it was a very positive reaction for me because I was so glad that this book was doing it. And I felt like it showed the background, the emotional ties that go into situations like this very accurately. But yeah, I felt like this one was a huge improvement over book 1. I really love this one. I really did. So that is what I read in May. If you have any other questions about these books I didn't quite cover, definitely ask me down below and I'll do my best to answer you down there. If you've read any of these and want to talk about your thoughts or your feelings on them, I would love to discuss further with you in the comments. And let me know what your favorite book that you read this month was. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the comments. Bye!